Hello and welcome to episode 44 of Afrikanists Assemble. This month, we're trying to bridge disciplines by asking a question that pushes us to think beyond traditional boundaries. Often, the natural sciences and the study of language are seen as separate pursuits, but what if we try to imagine new forms of interdisciplinary dialogue? This month, we asked our contributors, what do you think the natural sciences might gain by looking at African languages? Let's hear their ideas on how African languages can offer unique insights, models, or ways of understanding the world.
African languages are not just tools of communication, but repositories of indigenous knowledge. Proverbs, idioms, and local terminologies encode empirical insights across various fields. The natural sciences stand to benefit greatly by engaging with these linguistic repositories of observation and experience. Take a few Yoruba proverbs, for example. Ajanaku kìí gbàgbé ọ̀rọ̀ ogún ọdún. This means an elephant does not forget an event of 20 years. This is more than metaphor. It encodes an observation of elephant memory, which modern zoology confirms as among the most advanced in the animal kingdom. Kíkéré lábẹ́rẹ́ kéré, kìí ṣe mímì fádìẹ. Though the needle may be small, it cannot be swallowed by end. This teaches that not all things, however small, are compatible with everything. There is a natural order and scale of appropriateness. Another one is, Jotiyoro lábẹ́ ìfúùfù ni wọ́n ti mọ̀. You can tell the rain that will fall by the wind that precedes it. This reflects local meteorology, showing how farmers forecast rainfall from wind patterns. It aligns with the principles of atmospheric science. Another example of embedded indigenous knowledge is the Yoruba expression "Ekunle Abiyamo," referring to the kneeling position traditionally used by women during childbirth. Long before hospital beds were introduced, Yoruba women gave birth in upright or squatting positions. This expression symbolizes the intersection of language, culture, and empirical understanding, demonstrating how African linguistic traditions preserve birthing practices that align with physiological efficiency, even when they differ from dominant biomedical norms. While indigenous knowledge is rich, not all of it is scientifically valid. Some beliefs, such as pregnant women birthing spirit children if they walk in the afternoon sun, or becoming slow if they eat snails, lack empirical evidence. Similarly, claims that certain individuals can cool down or stop rain are not grounded in meteorology. Honoring indigenous knowledge does not mean romanticizing all of it. Some ideas are powerful and insightful, others are disproven or symbolic. Traditional knowledge systems are complex and often effective, but also contain beliefs that science can test, refine, or disprove. The challenge and opportunity is in critical integration. We must engage critically by preserving wisdom, challenging assumptions, and integrating the best of both worlds.
当我们谈到自然库松的时候，人们往往会联想到实验数据、观测记录或信使化的节目。然而从更根本的层面来看，库松的实践依赖于我们如何认识世界，如何划分现象或构建类别。而语言正是这种认识结构的重要基础，这不仅是交流工具，更深刻地塑造了我们观察、理解和组织自然经验的方式。非洲语言在这一点上为自然科学提供了极具启发性的资源。 它们承载了大量以地方知识或生态经验为基础的词汇系统，而这些系统往往被主流科学视野所忽略。举例来讲，在西非的富拉尼语中，仅仅用来描述牛的形容词就多到数十种。这些词不仅区分牛的毛色、脚型、体态或者是性格特征，还反映了放牧者对于动物行为、品种稳定性及与人关系的长期观察。这类语言实践所体现的是一种高度细致的生态认知系统，对动物遗传学、行为生态学或者是牧区管理的研究而言，这些在地语义分类本身就可能是重要的知识入口。类似的，东非广泛使用的斯瓦希里语里面也保存了关于植物生命周期或海洋生态的丰富术语系统。例如 Ntinga 指的是有椰果， Ntibichi 指的是还没完全成熟的椰子， Ntikavu 是用来指那些榨油的干椰子。而渔民会通过使用特定的词汇来描述季风、潮汐、鱼群迁徙模式，甚至还会把海浪状态视成与自然邻里互动的符号。这些语言结构所反映的并不仅仅是文化的差异，更是关于环境感知、风险判断和资源利用的一整套地方知识体系。那么自然科学可以从中获得哪吗？这可以获得一种对知识生产边界的反思。当我们忽略语言的多样性，就有可能错过对自然世界的多样化理解。而非洲语言不只是提供了新的术语或者是命名方式，而是呈现了一套关于世界如何可能被理解的替代方案。在当前全球科学日益重视跨学科、在地性和包容性的背景下，也许我们正处在一个转折点上，我们不再只是向语言灌输科学，而是开始从语言中听取科学的另外一种可能性。
Straight away, I would say that because technology is an answer to a question asked by culture, and every culture is locked in the language, or language is the doorway to every culture, where you can get to understand some of their own applied sciences. Technology is simply applied sciences. You're looking at natural sciences like biology, physics, and chemistry, and so on and so forth. And I'll give you a very small example of some of the gains that the natural sciences can make if they understand the local African languages of different sorts. Let's take, for example, the Yoruba. There are so many things that we did as children that it was only when we got into the university that somebody bothered to explain to us. For instance, when you grind beans, or your mother asks you to go and grind beans, instead of put the ground beans in the refrigerator until they're ready to use it, you'll be asked to put a charcoal at the middle of what you have just prepared. We never knew what it meant. We did not understand the science of it until we found out that charcoal has absorptive capacity and that it can absorb the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that could have mixed with the water in the beans to form slight carbolic acid. And one of the characteristics of carbolic acid is that it is sour. And so if you put your beans outside and carbon dioxide mixes with it, it will turn sour. Now we know that we can, with that, start to understand a great deal of how some of the things we did, some of the practices can be explained scientifically, and they can use the results of this to either make better products. And they've done that a lot with charcoal. And if you want to learn anything about the Ifa divination and the science it contains and the mathematics it contains, I cannot see how the natural sciences like physics and mathematics can benefit without an understanding of some of these practices that when you translate it into English, you will not really appreciate it unless you understand the language, or somebody who understands it translates it to you. There are so many things so many examples I can give you in terms of even in incantation, how the quality of your voice, the energy in your voice will change physical phenomena.
Ohun tí sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá yóò jèrè fún wíwo èdè Áfíríkà kò lóǹkà. Sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá jẹ́ ohun tí kò yọ èdè kankan ní orílẹ̀ ayé sílẹ̀. Gbogbo èdè àgbáyé ló ní àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ fún àwọn tí ó wà nínú sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá. Gbogbo èdè ni wọ́n ní ọ̀rọ̀ fún ẹ̀dá ẹlẹ́mìí àti aláìlẹ́mìí, tí wọ́n sì ní ìmọ̀ bí ẹ̀dá ẹlẹ́mìí àti aláìlẹ́mìí ṣe ń dàgbà àti bí wọ́n ṣe ń bára wọn gbé ní ilé ayé. Èdè kọ̀ọ̀kan ló ní ìmọ̀ orílẹ̀ ayé, bí a ti ń gbin nǹkan àti ìgbésẹ̀ híhù, ìmọ̀ ìbílẹ̀ nípa nǹkan ọ̀sìn, oògùn ìbílẹ̀, ìlóyún títí dórí ìbímọ, ìtàn nípa ohun àdáyébá, ẹranko, ewéko, igi àti bí ẹ̀dá ti ń gbé ilé ayé ní gbogbo èdè kọ̀ọ̀kan lè ṣe àtúpalẹ̀ rẹ̀. Bí a bá fi èdè Áfíríkà wo sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá, àwọn onímọ̀ sáyẹ́ǹsì yóò kọ́ bí àwọn Áfíríkà ṣe ń mọ̀ nípa ojú ọjọ́. Wọ́n ó kọ́ bí Áfíríkà ṣe ń kópa lórí òjò, bí wọ́n ti ń mú òjò tàbí fa òjò. Wọ́n ó kọ́ bí Áfíríkà ṣe ń lo ìmọ̀ abínibí tiwọn láti borí ìdààmú àyíká tí wọ́n fi ń yanjú ìṣòro ìyípadà àyíká. Wọ́n kọ́ nípa orúkọ tí àwọn Áfíríkà ń pe àwọn tó jẹ mọ́ sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá. Wọ́n kọ́ bí ẹ̀yà kọ̀ọ̀kan ní Áfíríkà ṣe ń fi ewé àti egbò ṣe ìwòsàn. Wọ́n kọ́ bí Áfíríkà ṣe ń lo ìmọ̀ àdáyébá wọn láti fi mú àyíká wọn dẹrùn láti gbé. Wọ́n kọ́ nípa bí Áfíríkà ṣe ń ṣe àti bí wọ́n ti ń lo ègbé àti kánòkò nínú ìjàmbá, àti bí wọ́n ti ń lo àfẹ́ẹ̀rí fún ẹranko búburú nínú igbó kí ó má bàa rí wọn. Wọ́n kọ́ nípa ìmọ̀ abínibí Áfíríkà lọ́pọ̀lọpọ̀. Sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá yóò jèrè gan. Ìwádìí fi hàn pé àwọn onímọ̀ sáyẹ́ǹsì àsọtẹ́lẹ̀ ojú ọjọ́ àti onímọ̀ ìbílẹ̀ àsọtẹ́lẹ̀ ojú ọjọ́ ti jọ ṣiṣẹ́ pọ̀ láti sọ nípa àwọn ìgbà tí òjò yóò rọ̀, àti bí àwọn olùtọ́jú ẹranko àti àyíká ti ṣiṣẹ́ pọ̀ pẹ̀lú àwọn ọdẹ láti dáàbò bo àwọn ẹranko tó ṣọ̀wọ́n nípa lílo ìmọ̀ àdáyébá. Áfíríkà ní orílẹ̀-èdè Áfíríkà bíi Ghana, Kenya àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ láti kojú ìṣòro ojú ọjọ́ àti ìyípadà àyíká. Ìmọ̀ ìbílẹ̀ Áfíríkà sì ràn wọ́n lọ́wọ́ láti wá ojútùú sí ìdààmú àyíká àti àyípadà ipò ojú ọjọ́. Bí sáyẹ́ǹsì àdáyébá bá lo èdè Áfíríkà, èyí yóò jẹ́ kí ìlọsíwájú túbọ̀ bá ìmọ̀ sáyẹ́ǹsì ní àgbáyé. Àwọn onímọ̀ sáyẹ́ǹsì yóò kọ́ nípa ìmọ̀ àdáyébá ti Áfíríkà tí àwọn baba ńlá wọn ti ń lò láti ṣẹ̀dálẹ̀ ayé, èyí tí wọ́n fi ń gbé ní ìrọ̀rùn pẹ̀lú ohun àdáyébá. Ẹ ṣeun.
When we think of the natural sciences, the subject of biology, environmental science, cognitive science, our minds often jump to laboratories, experiments, and maybe quantitative data. But science, we know, is fundamentally about observing, describing, and interpreting the world we live in so as to gain understanding. For centuries, a vast and often overlooked system of knowledge has been thriving right before our very nose, that is the African languages. Across Africa, there are over 2,000 languages, which I consider a treasure of trove of linguistic diversity. These are not just ways to communicate, they are vessels of indigenous knowledge that has been meticulously preserved and passed down orally through generations. Take, for example, environmental science. Many African communities have survived for millennia by keenly observing nature, rainfall patterns, soil conditions, plant properties, and so on and so forth. These vital observations are not just spoken, they are encoded within language itself. They are preserved in proverbs, aphorisms, naming systems, even in folk songs. We can imagine a plant named not just by its appearance, but by what medicinal values, that is in terms of the curative values that are present there, and also when it blooms. This is actionable, localized data. We also can consider the subject of taxonomy, which is the science of classifying living organisms. African languages often contain what is known as ethnobiological classifications. They are not just done randomly, but after deep reflection of ecological relationships and practical knowledge, they were able to establish this. In some incredible instances, this indigenous knowledge has directly led to the discovery of new species of plants that have been previously undocumented in formal science. It is indeed a living, breathing, natural history archive. Moving on to cognitive science and linguistics, African languages are a gold mine of fascinating features. We can think about the intricate tonal systems, the complex noun classes, or what is known as logophoricity, where speakers track points of view in ways that European languages simply cannot achieve. These features are not just linguistic curiosities, they challenge universal theories of language and cognition. Therefore, by studying how speakers of these languages process information, scientists can gain profound insights into the sheer diversity and adaptability of the human mind. When we come to the subject of mathematics, there are profound insights that African languages have presented because of the use of non-decimal counting systems like base 5 or base 20. And this embodies sophisticated geometrical ideas in practices like basket weaving or intricate architectural designs. They are not just different ways to count it, but they also offer alternative models of mathematical reasoning. Therefore, they enrich how we teach and conceptualize mathematics globally. In essence, African languages are far more than just tools for speech. They are age-long-old repositories of empirical knowledge that have been gathered through intimate, sustained interaction with diverse environments.
Batarde an he haɓɓodi lartiru annay dow ɓannu tagaɗo dow leɗɗe he dow waylagol wakkatiji. To boliɗe bateteɗe ɗe Afrika ɗo teddinanoma faa he gollitirede le lartiru annay haɓɓodingay waylagol wakkatiji fu. Ɗum wallitano yimɓe fu heɓa faama no waylitagol wakkatiji yehirta he ko ɗum waddanta en. Hande to a hoo'i kawrere, de kawrere lewru tubaku na yaɓoy noddete non ke tuma fena inke lewru awre. Ama hanne o lewru koy waran faafalto setto yanay taw ɗum hollanke yo wakkati waylake ɗum wa'a kadi hande daga no ɗum wonno. To en hoo'i fayɓaadere laatiru annay haɓɓodiingay henamma ɓannu tagaaɗo. To boliiɗe bateteeɗe de Afrika ɗo teddinanoma faa he gollitire fu ɗum laaɓanano yimɓe de adunaaru fu nke no aduna sennirita nokkuje ɓannu tagaaɗo he no ɓe noddita nokkuje ɗen he wa'i feere feere. Hande to a hoo'i fulfulde illa walbo faa wara jokka daane jungo ɗo no ɓe noddan ɗum noke jungo. Acci de boliiɗe gon kan ɗen ɗon he senna. To a hoo'i walbo faa wara yotto jokkule jungo inne feerere no. To a hoo'i jokkule jungo faa wara yotto daane jungo inne feerere no. To a hoo'i ɓaadere lartiru annay ko haɓɓodi leɗɗe. To boliiɗe bateteeɗe de Afrika ɗo teddinanoma faa he gollitire fu ɗum wallitanno yimɓe heɓa faamanke inɗe gonno on ɗe inna nokkuje leɗɗe ama ɗe inna du kujje gon feereje ɗe haɓɓodaaki leɗɗe. Hande to a hoo'i de Fulfulde leggay he woodi lanyere, neɗɗo bo he woodi lanyere.
African continent, which is known for its lush linguistic landscape, accommodates a significant percentage of world languages. Languages are not just means of communication. African languages are conveyors of the histories, experiences, cultural practices, philosophies, indigenous knowledge systems of the people, and more. Sadly, most of the languages exist in oral forms and have not received any form of scholarly attention. Thus, knowledge systems and practices that stand to be of benefit to scholarship and humanity at large are yet to be gleaned, included into any global knowledge database. African languages reflect a deep knowledge of the interaction between man and nature. In Africa, man is not isolated from the rest of nature. The synergy between man, the plants, the animals, the ecosystem is reflected in the daily linguistic interactions of the people, in the folklores, myth, proverbs, and other forms of speech. For example, narratives in the form of myth and folklores often reflect knowledge about animal, plants, their natural environment, and their relationship with humans. The stories with animal characters highlight their nature, characteristics, habits. The stories also highlight some information on the natural habitats of the animals. Information from the stories stands to be of relevance to disciplines in biology, agricultural sciences, food sciences, among others. Animal symbolism, which reflect in the speech patterns and naming patterns in some African societies, also highlight an understanding of animal sciences. For example, people are named after animals based on the understanding of the characteristics of the animals, the practice of animism, and the use of animal totems as cultural identity markers further reflect a deep knowledge of animal science that can yield to paradigm shifts in the disciplines. Again, in many African languages, the cultural practice of the use of proverbs in diverse communities highlight an understanding of the ecosystem. The language usage expresses experiences and knowledge about food, the climate, herbs for different types of diseases, reproduction, agriculture, traditional medical practices, among others, which are of relevance to diverse disciplines in natural sciences. These are very few examples of the potential benefit of natural sciences from African languages. The cultural information in African languages can add additional information to existing concepts and can even produce novel information. The information, when included, can fill existing gaps in knowledge and can shift frontiers of knowledge production in diverse disciplines in natural sciences.
The natural sciences are the discipline that studies the physical world using scientific method of observation, experimentation, hypothesis, and so on. These methods of study involves the use of inductive logic to understand and interpret the world. This discipline includes chemistry, physics, biology, geology, and the likes. Inasmuch as they have enhanced the progress of the human race and the world in general, there might be additional value that the natural sciences can add to the understanding of the world if it extends its tentacles to the studies of African languages. Some of these values include: 1. It will make the natural sciences understand the world through the lenses of African-human relationship, as language is a vehicle for relationships. 2. It will not restrict the natural sciences to a laboratory studies alone, but to a societal studies that enhance massive participation of people who are not exposed to scientific methods of inquiry, since they can express their knowledge through their indigenous African languages. 3. It will reduce the barrier between the literate and illiterate, since knowledge can also be found among the African languages and not limited to only those who are educated in the scientific sense. 4. The natural sciences will discover that some of the laboratory discoveries can also be found in African languages and cultures, even without subjecting it to scientific methods. 5. Bringing the natural sciences into the study of African languages will also enhance mutual progress and exchange of intellectual sagacity. 6. It will encourage tolerance and acceptance. 7. It will expand the frontiers of knowledge discovery and acquisition. In conclusion, even as technological advancement is breaking the barriers between knowledge blocks through access to massive information on the internet, if the natural sciences begins to explore African languages, it will lead to a new paradigm shift in the understanding and interpretation of the world.
This month's topic reminds me of an experience I had as an undergraduate. It was final year and I was leading the tutorial class for my classmates. It was a very technical course, quite alright. And in the process of explaining this linguistics course to my classmates, every other person eventually got it, but one of my classmates. And I could read from the person's body language that she wasn't getting it. I tried different methods, different approaches. I tried to explain in every way I knew, but it wasn't working. Now here's the catch. I looked to her friend and asked her, "Do you understand what I have explained?" She said she understood. Okay, can you explain this thing to your friend, but do it in your native language? She said she could do it. So I asked her to do it. And immediately I saw this other lady's face lit up, and it was like a light bulb came on her face. I was so surprised and at the same time impressed. And it was in that moment I knew. I said, if we are going to learn anything technical, anything scientific, then it has to be in our language. Many of us, we think in our native languages because it's the first language of interaction for us. And having to learn in our native languages makes a whole lot of difference. Now imagine we bring in natural science, or we use our African languages to teach natural sciences. Imagine how much progress, how much better innovations that we would make. I believe that using natural or African languages to teach natural sciences amongst other topics or subjects will be very helpful to students and to the world of innovation in general.
Uru sayensị nsinachi ga-erite n'asụsụ mba Afrịka buru ibu, ndị gụnyere nchọpụta usoro na ọgwụ ọhụrụ na ọgwụgwọ ọrịa ma hazie ha n'usoro sayensị. E nwere ọtụtụ ọrịa nke ọgwụ ndị bekee na-anaghị agwọtali ma ọ bụ gwọchaa kpamkpam, mana ahịhịa na mgbọrọgwụ ndị mba Afrịka na-agwọ ma na-akwụsịkwa ha. Ọ bụrụ na esite n'asụsụ mba Afrịka tụgharịa gaa n'asụsụ mba ụwa ndị ọzọ, ahịhịa na mgbọrọgwụ ndị a, usoro ọgwụgwọ na ka esi aṅụ ha, a ga-enweta ezi usoro sayensị nsinachi ga-esi hazichaa ha. Dịka mgbe ọrịa nje korona bịara, anyị hụrụ na o kpochapụrụ ndị ọcha karịa ndị ojii n'ihi na e nwere ọtụtụ ahịhịa na mgbọrọgwụ ndị ojii ji gwọọ nke ha, nke bụ na atụgharịa ha n'asụsụ mba ụwa ndị ọzọ, ọ ga-enyere sayensị aka n'ịrụpụta ọgwụ ọlọrọ ọhụrụ ga-agbaso nchọcha tara ọchịchị ma belata ogo ọnwụ n'ebe ọ dị ukwuu. Ọzọkwa, ịgba ọkpụkpụ n'ụzọ ọdịnala na-aka ala ọsịsọ karịa nke ụlọ ọgwụ ndị bekee. Idekọ na ịmụta ka esi eme ya n'ụzọ ọdịnala bịazie hazie ya n'ụzọ ọlọrọ ọhụrụ nke nchọcha sayensị ga-ama mma. Asụsụ ala anyị nwere ike nyere sayensị nsinachi aka na ndekọ usoro obibi ndụ ihe ndị dị ndụ, ahịhịa ndị na-agwọ ọrịa na usoro nchekwa ha. Isonye na nchọcha. Iji asụsụ Afrịka eme nchọcha nke sayensị na nke nkụzi ihe ga-eme ka mkparịta ụka dị mfe ma mee ka ndị obodo nwee mmasị isonye na nchọcha nke ga-akwalite ma bulitekwuo nchọcha nke sayensị. Sayensị ọdịnala nke mba Afrịka. Mba Afrịka na-eji asụsụ ha na-emepụta ọtụtụ sayensị ọdịnala ha, dịka ịgba afa, ịkpụ ụzụ, ịha mmiri, dịrị gawazie. E nwere ike ịtụgharị ha gaa n'asụsụ mba ụwa ma mekwuo nchọcha na ha n'ụzọ ọhụrụ gbasoro sayensị nsinachi nke nwere ike ịkwalitekwu ha. E nwere ọtụtụ uru sayensị nsinachi ga-enweta n'iji asụsụ mba Afrịka arụ ọrụ. Ndewonu.
Before I go into the discussion, I would like to, first of all, highlight the need to understand what the natural sciences are and how their language is constituted or refers. What are the deficiencies of African languages in teaching scientific subjects? What do the natural sciences need to give before they gain from African languages? First, the natural sciences are an area whose history has been informed by empirical investigation dating back to the pre-Socratic sciences. But a re-emergence in the Western Hemisphere occurred since the Enlightenment era, some 400 years ago. Examples of natural sciences range from mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, to even information technology. Over the last 400-year period, the natural science language has had more additions, especially nouns and verbs, than any other natural language on earth. So it has a unique feature of being very elastic in absorbing new terms. The indicative aim of this language is to present information associated with the nature of the object it presents, which is the real, and the established truths of the discipline. Take fields like biotechnology, engineering, information technology, medicine, physiology as examples. These are the fastest growing disciplines today. With this growth comes an immense upsurge in the assimilation of new terms, owing to their elasticity to accommodate novel ideas that require capturing and making sense of. It's precisely this very commodious capability that it has something to lend to African languages, which in the long run becomes its own gain. African languages have limited indicative power for covering scientific phenomena. They encounter challenges when trying to apprehend phenomena not existing in the indigenous African thought prior to colonialism. So if African languages can borrow from the elasticity of natural languages to enlarge their scope of scientific texts, the natural sciences would, in the same vein, be gaining by expanding the presence of their phenomena. This might give rise to teaching scientific subjects in African languages, which in turn extends the influence of the natural sciences beyond the major Western languages they are written in and studied in today. In a nutshell, natural sciences would gain more visibility if vigorous efforts were geared towards translating them into African languages. In Nigeria, for instance, Ogbonnaya Okoro has commenced this initiative by translating an ordinary level physics textbook to Igbo, a major Nigerian language. All the government of Nigeria and many other African countries need to do is to fund this initiative and get more hands to engage in this venture, and the gain of natural sciences will be more visible. It should be a deliberate and framed as national language policy, though through this, indigenous African languages will be greatly enriched and their latitude of educational uses will momentously expand, while natural sciences will gain by widening their possibility of influence.
That wraps up all the contributions for this month. It's clear that African languages don't just name the world, they interpret it, shape it, and reveal its complexity in ways that could deeply enrich the natural sciences. Which of the ideas shared today resonated with you? What other forms of knowledge sharing between science and language would you like to see? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Afrikanists Assemble. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we keep asking thought-provoking and sometimes surprising questions about African languages and literatures. See you next time.
Bye.